All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the Real Trilateral Commission, episode 2. Michael Wan and Howdie McCoskey are both here. And, last we were really happy with how the first episode went. We got a lot of really cool feedback. And some of the topics that we sort of touched upon and brought up there have continued to bleed over into, I think, other things that certainly I have done, but I think, and I know that some stuff with Michael, but people have continued to point out how other things that I talk about that I think are totally not connected. Actually, there's a connection to some of the things that we uncovered during that last episode. So the more ripples we can create out into things, that's what I kind of always love. So I was super happy with that, but we're going to do it again today. And today is Howdie's topic. So he's going to introduce that to us in just a minute, but just real quickly before we start, how you doing, guys?
Yeah, I guess I was saying I'm okay. It's been a busy day out here on the farm. You guys are still early in the morning getting started, but I've had a full work day out here.
And Michael, how are
Life is good out here in Pennsylvania. I'm excited to hear what we're going to talk about and what we're going to see. And, I'm ready to get the ball rolling.
All right. Well, let's
he's excited. You can tell.
He's excited. Hey,
I'm an excitable guy, It's like, that's I need to learn how to bring it down. Like that's not my natural state is like the calm. I have to work on that. But if it left to total freedom of expression, yeah, I'm like manic as can be at times, and I'm really manic and excited and spun up right now in a fun way. But Howdie, one of the things which I enjoy so much about this little threesome which we do is you bring such a grounding energy to it, so it allows me to and get that focus which you demonstrate so well. So let's see if I can pick up on some of that.
Michael, we all love watching you get excited. That's part of the joy of looking at your, listening to you and watching your stuff is watching you you're very excited with yourself, right? You're very impressed by the things you uncover. It's very fun to watch.
Oh, wow.
All right. So let's get started. And this is Howdie's topic. So Howdie, take it away.
Okay. So the topic, the basic structure for anyone who hasn't seen this is what we were supposed to do is 3 days before this talk. This was my turn today to go to some various news sources and just look through at random what's on the news sources and come up with something odd, something strange, something different, something unique. And as I started going through topics, after you get through all the stupid 19 stuff, the first one that was coming up on Sunday was this 3,000-year-old golden city supposedly rediscovered in Egypt. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm an Egypt guy. I wrote a book on Egypt. Yeah, okay, whatever. Keep looking. And I go to a next source, and that would be the story. And I go to the next source, and that would be the story. Every time I would get past what's going on in the world right now, that's the number one story. And it kind of got to the point where I said, okay, for some reason, the universe is saying, this is what we got to talk about. So this is what we're going to talk about. So the story itself, which I'm not going to mention too much, is just very briefly, and you can go anywhere on the internet to find it, is that, and it links to last Saturday. So a week Saturday was Easter? Or was it the last Saturday?
It was a week ago, so in the United States, a week ago Sunday, yeah.
Right. So on the Saturday of that week, there was this weird mummy parade that happened in Egypt that I talked about, where a whole bunch of mummies were transferred from the main museum in downtown Cairo to another museum. And they had this very strange Super Bowl-like experience. It was creepy, actually. And I had mentioned, this is a marker point. This is there's something has happened with this. This is not by random. And the fact that they're moving mummies all pretty much, from the time period of Ramses and Seti, and especially, of course, in the weird period of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. So 2 days later, after I did this, all of a sudden, here comes this story of some 3,000-year-old, and they're calling it a golden city. That's usually how it's presented. 3,000-year-old golden city uncovered in the Nile. And a few will say golden era city, but I guess I can screen share just so everybody can, I guess it's this. Yeah. So for people, so you can see what we're talking about, 3,000-year-old golden era lost city unearthed near Luxor, Egypt. The discovery of this lost city is the second most important archaeological discovery since the tomb of Tutankhamun. Ooh, exciting. And of course, this is, I'm not sure this is it, but of course, Aiwass has to be in front of the camera, and you can go through and look at some of this information. There's nothing really detailed. There's no real photos of anything, but what was important is they were linking the city to Amenhotep III. Now, Amenhotep III historically was the pharaoh before Akhenaten. So Akhenaten is Amenhotep III's son. And Akhenaten would be considered a potential very dangerous figure in our current time right now, because many secret societies link their foundation, you might say, to Akhenaten. They don't link it further than that. They don't link it to the old kingdom of Egypt. They're linking it to Akhenaten specifically. And I don't want to get into all of the strange stuff with that. But first off, I felt right away when I was looking at the story that there's no coincidence that they're presenting this finding of the city of an Akhenaten, Amenhotep period city, and the mummy parade. They're linked. There's no question they're linked, and there's a message in that. Okay, so I said, where am I going to take this? And I looked around Luxor. I tried to find it. I looked around, and finally I started thinking, well, wait a minute. Golden cities, because that's what they're calling it. It's not really a golden city. There's no gold there, but they're calling it golden city. And so all of a sudden there's these famous stories of the cities of gold, right? Particularly in South America. Most would know mostly about El Dorado. That's sort of the most famous of the cities, those looking for. But like you say, there's others, this Piatti, the city of the Caesars, Lake Parme. There's a number of these, Sayabola. All of these supposed cities, and they're always classified as gold cities in the mythology. So that got me thinking, okay, golden city, lost city, keep looking further. So where did I go from that? Well, yeah, where is El Dorado? And here's the story of looking and trying to find this lost city of the pre-Incas or whatnot, right? The legendary lost city of gold was a beacon for thousands of explorers and gold seekers for centuries. Desperate men from all over the world came to South America in the vain hope of finding El Dorado, and many lost their lives in the harsh plains, steamy jungles, etc. of it. And of course, there's a myth around it. But I said, okay, this is linked somehow, but it's still not it. So I kept looking further. Where is this going to take me? Oh, Golden City. How about Golden, Colorado, which was the original capital of the state of Colorado before Denver. And this has a very strange story in itself, right? It was supposedly founded during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, a mining camp named Golden City in honor of Thomas L. Golden, right? Some miner from Georgia. So they named the city after a miner. And of course, we will see that Golden in mythology is linked in two direct. You'll always hear these stories of gold in ancient myths, and the gold is the same gold as you'll find in alchemy, and that gold is really, it's not a physical gold they're talking about, it's the inner transformative gold. If you've gone from the black of Negretto and worked through the process and gone through the inner labyrinth to reach a golden state. So and of course, people would think like things like also Shambhala, right? Another golden city, all these famous golden cities. But then you have Golden, supposedly named after this person in the provisional territory of Jefferson, named Jefferson Territory. Okay, so that was kind of interesting. But then I looked here. While there's the Colorado School of Mines, look what else is in Golden. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the National Earthquake Information Center, the Coors Brewing Company, Coors Tech, Boston Market, Spyderco, which is a cutlery company, Software Bisque. And now here comes some interesting things. There was the birthplace of something called the Jolly Rancher, a candy brought out by Hershey Foods. Jolly Rancher, of course, is the name. It's a link to pirates and linked to the entire story of what a pirate might be, which I remember Roy Norville in his book Hermes Unveiled talked about, that the whole pirate story is really a hermetic myth, and all the tales of treasure and buried treasure and what pirates were doing is actually like a code for an entire Hermetic tradition that was going on at that period of time. And now here we have the Jolly Rancher. It's also home to something called Yeti Cycles, an American bicycle manufacturer, and it's the burial very close by of Buffalo Bill Cody, who has a lot of questions to ask as well, you know, of who or what this person was and who or what they were related to in history. Okay, I don't want to get into too detailed into Golden, but it's also a very, like, there's a picture of Golden for anyone who doesn't know what it is. But I saw there was a photo, I can't find it now, but it was this very early photo of Golden, supposedly, maybe it's here somewhere in this little, yeah, here it is. This is supposed to be Golden at the time of its founding, or you know, 10 years after, which is just some shacks. This is what you would expect of a new city like in California, like San Francisco or Los Angeles. This is what it should have looked like, not the buildings we see in the photos, but okay. So we went there. Where do I go from there? Well, I go to something called the Gold Dome in Oklahoma City, a landmark on Route 666. I'll just pull it up because you won't be able to see it, but this is the Gold Dome. It's actually, I think, a bank. So, which is really bizarre. It's actually a bank, and it's in, I could say it's a landmark gold geodesic dome in the home of the city's Chinatown area Asian district. Okay. And it was made, it's known as the Gold Dome. It's the 5th geodesic gold dome construction in the world, and the first to be used as a bank. It was by Citizen State Bank, and it was designed by Buckminster Fuller. Now, Buckminster Fuller, of course, is always connected with all sorts of spiritual topics and topics of very unique inner work. So, okay, why is he the architect of this very interesting thing in Oklahoma City? And if you, I went to, because I know Michael likes to do this a lot, is really go in and look at the location on the map and what you can find. And it's just in a really odd place in Oklahoma City. It's in a, it's just like, I don't know if this map will actually, just a map of Oklahoma. I thought there was a map here of it somewhere, but it was just in a really strange location in the city. It's like, didn't seem like there's much around it at all. Okay, Gold Dome. So then I began thinking more and more and more gold cities. And of course, it also links, these also link to the stories of like the inner earth, that there's always a golden city in the center of the earth. This location of like, if you these stories of these people who went into the hole in the North Pole and came into this completely other earth, so to speak. That was, of course, the city was, and always the city is always classified as golden. It's a golden city. And so when I then finally linked it back, the last thing when I would how much time have I got, Laura? If we have
10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay. We'll probably have a longer discussion then. But if I can, because I didn't call this one up, but that would be the this here, which is where I finished my World Exposition book, was a discussion on the Domus Aurea of Rome, which is the Golden House of Nero. And the Golden House of Nero was this very strange, massive palace built in Rome right after a great fire, just like Chicago. And he built something that looked just like the Chicago Exposition. In fact, it only lasted like 10 years. It was massive. It was, does it tell you how big it is? It was like, again, hundreds of 300 acres of size. And it had I wish there was a nice photo of it. I'll have to find you a really nice photo. But the story of the Domus Aurea is so strange. And if we want to go, if you guys want me to go into it when we begin our discussion, I can. But the Domus Aurea is like one of the biggest lies I've ever come across of what it was, what happened to it. And the Domus Aurea, within 20 years after Nero, right after Nero's death, was literally supposedly just steamrolled. They just blew it up. And where the lake was, because there was a massive lake in the middle of the Domus Aurea, and that is where the Colosseum was built. So they didn't even build the Colosseum on top of solid ground. They built the Colosseum in Rome on top of the lake of the Domus Aurea. There's actually, like, I think the lake is actually realistically still under the Colosseum, because remember, they used to have these battles, these naval battles. They said they would flood the floor of the Colosseum to have naval battles sometimes. Well, probably they just pumped into the lake underneath, pulled the water up. They didn't even need to bring the water in with the aqueducts or anything else. So again, as I began then really trying to say, okay, let's go back to the story. I can get rid of the screen share here so you can Where's the, why am I not? Meeting controls. Why can I not find my, oh, stop share. Learn how to read your screen. So for me, the two most important elements that we can get into in the discussion here, we can have a longer discussion, is one, is the Egyptian announcement itself and the timing of it, right next to the weird mummy parade, that it's linked to the same time period and specifically linked to the reign of Akhenaten. And then secondly, this idea that they want to keep presenting in the headlines, the news media wants to present Golden City. And the idea of a golden city is a huge part of, this ancient mythology, and as well these ideas of exploration. And of course, these are all even Jason and the Argonauts, right? And all these great Greek stories. There's the story of the Golden Fleece in the labyrinth. It's always a part of this inner journey, and part of, you might say, what the finding is meant to be, just like in alchemy, is to find the gold, which is of course your spiritual essence, or your completed totality, and the whole process is meant to be revealed through this shining gold. So that's what brought up to me these two areas, and I think I'll just stop and let you guys have a little discussion or question about it and see where this goes.
You want to go first, Michael?
You go first.
All right. Okay. So this is pretty interesting. So I'm going to try not to get into things that I was going to talk to in my own part of the presentation, and just stick to what Howdie said, but it did connect to stuff. So first of all, okay. So I started taking notes at the point where you were talking about gold in Colorado and whatnot, and, Denver and whatnot. And just yesterday, I think in our show, Michael, you and I talked, or was sometime this week, about, or maybe it was last week, the connection between Denver and Austin, right? In terms and it's connected, of course, by the Colorado River. I'd be curious as to how close to the Colorado River Golden actually is. So you brought that up, and I started buzzing right away, and I had to stay focused to try and pull things out, because something got activated in me by what you were talking about. Okay. So right here, I saw everything, like a lot of my perceptions of everything right now are being framed by, I just relocated to Austin. I used to live here about 20 years ago, right? And I just relocated back here. And I firmly believe that Austin is largely being set up as sort of like the new, like the golden city of the new sort of the new world that we're being ushered into, in terms of the combination of tech and pop culture and all of this kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of focus on Austin. But there's actually Yeti that makes the thermoses, right? Is literally their shop here, their headquarters is literally on the river. It is literally sitting on top of the bridge at the shore of the river, right? Right there here in Austin. And when you pointed out Jolly Rancher, right? Which of course Hershey is there in Pennsylvania where Michael is, but they created Jolly Rancher in Colorado. So Jolly Rancher was probably the most important candy in my mind control programming when I was a kid, right? The summer camp that I went to, where I had all these experiences with the underground base kind of stuff near the particle accelerator and whatever, like I could get Jolly Ranchers at the camp either as a reward, or I could buy them at the little shop there. Right. And the flavor of the cherry one is an incredibly unique flavor. And that for cherry flavored candies are very associated with my mind control. And so as soon as you said Jolly Rancher, I started to get a little bit dizzy, almost like that way one would get when they're starting to be drugged or starting to go under hypnosis. Right. So that was kind of interesting. But the other thing, so we have Yeti on the river here in Austin. We also, just a few blocks from the river, there is a bar called Buffalo Bills. And then you were talking about someone named Cody, and the gentleman who is credited with creating the 3D printed guns, his name is Cody, and he's here in Austin. Okay, so I'm like paralleling some of these current things to this older stuff, but in my presentation, I'm going to do it to Egypt, but right now to your comparison with this golden city, right? So I thought that was interesting. And then you started talking about this dome bank in Oklahoma City. Well, I've also noticed that there's a lot of banks around the river here, and a lot of these buildings down here have pyramids on top of them, right? And the geodesic domes have come up before in a lot of the stuff that we've done, as has Oklahoma City as a very bizarre, esoteric kind of place. And I think Buckminster Fuller even came up in something that I was looking into it in relationship to the connection between mid-century modern architecture and like pedophilia cults. Like there's like this, I've ended up in some weird rabbit holes in my day, but that same thing kind of played into that line I went down a while back as well. And then the other thing is you talked about these golden cities that we always talk about that in reference to inner earth. Well, we talked about the inner earth in our last episode when we talked about the company that made the Mayflower and the rock in the middle of the creek up in Round Rock, which is a suburb of Austin here, also near the river, right? And I know from my own past experiences here that there is a network of underground waterways here in Austin. And I have memories of like underwater breathing kind of exercises while still having project kind of experiences here in Austin. And it is my assessment when reconsidering all of my past experiences here and what I'm observing here, that there very much is an underground city here and that there are access points and portals to it all over this city. And that is kind of what I am tasking myself with at this point, is really starting to understand how this works. And when you were talking about this golden dome, right? So what was interesting to me is in relation to some things Michael and I have talked about, I also have a friend named Ra Castaldo, who, when Michael and I were talking about some certain things in relation to this Elisa Lam case that we got into, we were talking about light bending technologies. My friend Ra Castaldo remote viewed some sort of pyramid, like an etheric or like sort of other dimensional pyramid sitting over Austin, right? And that it was like sort of being used with light to activate certain points here in the sort of in the city, both in the 3D reality, but in the other etheric realities sort of around it. That same day that I heard about that from him, there was a story in the news about how the military was acknowledging that they were calling it UFO technology, but what it really was some sort of light and space bending technology. And in the picture that accompanied the story, that looked like there was a golden pyramid on top of what looked like a computer motherboard. And if you look at downtown Austin right now, it looks like a computer motherboard, right? It looks like some kind of technology. And so when I kind of put together these two things, what my friend Ra had said in this story, I'm like, there is some sort of energetic, interactive, interfacing kind of pyramid, right? That is creating sort of a light bending or time bending technology around the city. And we talked about this in the show Michael and I did when I first got here. I'm having very strange anomalous things go missing, things reappear, time dilation, time contraction, time filtration, like all sorts of weird stuff. So I think that there's I mean, I'm going to get into some of this in my presentation, but I think that I would be curious to look at the way that maybe Denver, Golden, Austin are connected in relationship to the Colorado River. But it was so fascinating to me that just points from your presentation, I could pull that all up from this area that I'm localized in. That's all, everything we've talked about is within like a mile and a half of my home here right now. Right, all these things that sort of connected with the Yeti and these golden kind of stuff and whatnot. So the other thing I wanted to say is you talked about the Colosseum, like how it would fill with water and whatnot. There's a really good video on the FPV Angel YouTube channel that shows how the water would come in and out of that, so people can really understand what you're talking about. And it also made me think of Cirque du Soleil at Las Vegas, right? Which is where like we also have a Luxor, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that in my presentation. But Cirque du Soleil, which is also refers to the sun, which we're talking about here with Akhenaten and whatnot. And they had one came out many, many years ago called O, in which the entire arena would suddenly fill with water and it would also disappear. Like so part of the circus was on dry land, part of it was in water, but the literal arena in which it was happening would fill with water and drain. Right, as people were watching the show. So anyway, those were kind of all the interesting things I pulled from your presentation. But I think I like this idea that the inner earth sort of connected to both our last topic, right, and to this topic that we're doing. But there was a ton of interesting stuff there. This is a loaded story. So I liked your take on it too. I liked you didn't go any place I thought you would go with it. And I love that. Like it was completely different than what I expected. So Well done.
Michael.
Thanks.
Michael?
First is kind of like what Emily was saying. It's interesting to see how this like encapsulated little thing, which the three of us are doing, is, you know, it's not encapsulated. And I think that's part of, at least when I approach this type of work, is demonstrating the lack of encapsulation, like it's all connected. And so as I was pulling my presentation together, I was also doing a second presentation, which is all in Boulder, Colorado. So it's like, it hit that. So that I thought was interesting. And I'm going to be going into this in my presentation, is how I see this story connected to the previous story. It's not like it ended there. It's a continuation. So this continuation aspect is important, or a viewpoint of mine. Like Emily, the golden dome, I thought was very, that caught my awareness, the geodesic dome in Oklahoma City, and just quickly went and did some checks to its proximity to the Alfred Murrah building, where, that's probably Oklahoma City's best known ritual, because that's what we're talking about with these 22, the movement of the 22 mummies. It's a public ritual. It's a public ceremony. It's a public, occulted ritual. And I would suggest the same thing happened. Oklahoma City's connection to, or their biggest one that at least in contemporary mind, is the blowing up of that building. They're pretty close to each other. And, I didn't go deep, but I think there's something there. And it also paralleled the research I was just doing on JonBenet Ramsey in Boulder, because they happened right around the same time. But those were just kind of like, my general thoughts. But the question I have for you, and where I'd like you to go a little bit deeper, is, particularly as it relates to the idea of golden playing into the deeper alchemical transformation that the human being has the potentiality to go through and experience. How does that tie? How is that symbolized? Like, or do you see a connection between the movement of those 22 mummies, and then like how that story connects to, all of the people who are meant to go and see it? What is that connection to you?
Of the mummy parade specifically?
Yeah, like that's it. Like that's the thing. I agree with you completely. Like that's what they want you to see.
Yeah, it really felt like they were trying to awaken that time period, if that makes sense. That like that time in history has now been asleep, mummified, and like this is the moment that time period wants to be. They're turning it back on. That they're turning. They want the time when that's a period of Amun Ra. Amun Ra is the prime Egyptian deity, the sort of the pantheon of deities in ancient Egypt that we would know of in the Old Kingdom, be the Osiris and Isis and Horus and Ra. They had all kind of been squeezed out for quite a while, where Amun Ra, this sort of new Amun, had existed for in the old pantheon, but all of a sudden this deity is placed at the top of the pyramid. All of a sudden, you might say, in it's almost like the feeling they want Amun Ra back in charge again. And for me, in the way I've done my research, it could be a very dangerous energy to play with, because it's a very it's supposed to mean the hidden. Amun is supposed to mean hidden in the ancient Egyptian language, and that's what the god is supposed to be, as part of the 8 primordials of Thoth, of. But Amun seems to also get this really strange connection to warfare and conflict and control and all of these kind of things that are very very not like the other pantheon of Egyptian deities that are normally worshipped. So that's the first thing that comes to mind is from the mummy parade, is that. And again, I got the feeling that there was only one mummy or one thing they were trying to focus on, and that's Akhenaten. That I tried to find who the 22 mummies were. I had a really tough time tracking that down, but I don't doubt that Akhenaten is the one that they want the focus on.
Okay.
And so to me, that's the ritual. The ritual is the attempt to bring this period back into this realm.
Is what are the, you know, in a just general sense, what are the qualities associated with the idea of Akhenaten?
Well, the story is supposed to be that he's the heretic king who destroys the old Egyptian pantheon and brings in this new idea, the Aten, to worship just the sun disk, and creates a brand new city known as Amarna, just north of Luxor, but basically destroys the whole old system to have what they claim is a one god system, but all the artwork changes, everything changes, and it's so interesting that to me the Akhenaten story also links very closely to what became the Moses story in the Bible, where okay, was it the followers before Akhenaten who were the ones who were kicked out of Egypt and had to go, or is the story relating to when for some reason Akhenaten was finally overthrown and it was him and his followers that were going? There's no question. The Moses story in the Bible links to the real story or semi-real story of whatever Akhenaten represents. It's just anytime I've ever gone to look at Akhenaten statues, Akhenaten Amarna period sites, the energy is really nasty. I have never once come across, and in fact, I think this links to the story of Tutankhamun because I don't think there may have never been a Tutankhamun. That might be a whole fabricated myth, and certainly the tomb of, because they claim this city is the biggest archaeological find right since Tutankhamun. But in my study, the tomb of Tutankhamun has nothing to do with that at all. It looks like it's the tombs of Nefertari, combined with the tomb of Thutmose III, crown prince, who died young, and they just Howard Carter just found all this stuff, stuffed it in there. He's the one who painted the walls. I mean, I don't want to go into all the details of how you can see that the Tutankhamun tomb has been faked, and basically created a false tomb and a fake story and a fake everything to not only acknowledge this great find, but to cement the idea of Tutankhamun ending the reign of Akhenaten. So the whole story is still, and like I say, I when I was in Egypt, I've been in every single tomb in the Valley of the Kings. I won't go into the tomb of Tutankhamun. It's just, even when I get to the steps, I get creeped out. I just won't go in.
I've got 2 follow-up questions to that.
Yes, sir.
And then I have a follow-up as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I feel like we're at a presidential debate. Okay, I have 2 follow-up questions for that. So listening to you talk makes me realize how little I know about the Egyptian stories, and I'm embarrassed because I'm going to say all the names wrong. But was it Amun-Ra who you were talking about is symbolic with like the hidden, like the is within that story, like how is that hidden brought out? Is the hidden like something which is like meant to be in the stories that we know? Is it meant to be brought, like shadow being brought out, or is it more so like hidden, like you're like more? How would you describe that hidden? I'm curious about that.
Okay, in the initial story, there's 3 different Egyptian creation stories. So this in the creation myth that Amun comes in is the one from Hermopolis, known as the Tehuti Thoth story, and in it there's 8 primordials that have been created by Ptah, and they're mirrored. I can't remember all of them now, but so like there's Amun and Amunet. There's a male and a female. So there's always this matching pair. There's 4 matching pairs. So there would be the hidden and the seen, right? That would be the matching pair. But this is like at the primordial. There's still no form yet. These 4 primordials would be the classification of the thing that is brought together energetically to begin to allow form to appear within this realm. So hidden means even hidden from the fact that there isn't even form to be hidden from.
Okay.
So it's like it would be like a hidden. I think it's meant to be like an unbelievably almost like the feeling would be almost like what you call the unmanifested mind, the place where all objects and experiences and everything reside, and if you can reach that place, you can manifest, right? That's almost that the hidden is this place of total manifestation.
Okay. And then you mentioned for the other one, it was
Akhenaten.
Akhenaten. Thank you very much. Akhenaten, you said that he is at least thought of, or the way it's presented, that it was during his reign that there was the greatest change in terms of like something ended and something new began.
Yep.
Is that like, does that show itself in other parts of the history in Egypt, where there's like very clear demarcations where like everything changes? Or is this kind of like, is he the only or the sole example where there's like a total like end and beginning of something new?
It's the most obvious and the most clear in everything that's there. And oddly, if you look at pictures of the statues, he looks like Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. I've seen those.
Yeah. Yeah, almost exactly.
Right.
And but that literally was a shift, a clear shift, at least in the way it's presented, even by the Egyptians, as a complete shift in everything. Now, you could also say like pyramid building Egypt was the only other major shift, where pyramids were still being built and then all of a sudden they stopped. So that would be about the only one that could possibly match the huge change of Akhenaten, was way back in the Old Kingdom, where when pyramids stopped being built.
Okay. All right.
To me, that would be your two dividing lines of real different in Egypt. But they still have these periods that archaeologists, they call Hyksos reigns, where they claim that Pharaonic Egypt was overthrown for a few hundred years, and some outside invaders, they have no idea who, took over the country for a while, and then they were beat out, and then a few hundred years later they came back again, and there's no information of who these Hyksos are, what happened to them, it's like this giant just question mark. That would be the other one, is, well, who are these Hyksos? Who are these outside invaders? How could they take over Egypt? And why would they all of a sudden be kicked out so soon? And so there's also this, is Akhenaten this outside force? That's another feeling that there's perhaps this, it's related to an outside force, because I always see, way I see the Middle East, I'll stop talking, I've been talking too long now, but that like everything in the world, there's always a dual nature to everything. So if I'm seeing ancient Egypt, at least old Egypt, pyramid Egypt, as the time of like a very clear, balanced, harmonious time, then there has to be a clear unharmonious place, and that would be Babylon and Sumeria. And so you've got Babylon and Sumeria and Egypt kind of in a constant energetic conflict. And sometimes it seemed like Egypt, like you might say, couldn't keep the energetic wall up, and eventually started breaking down. The last thing before I get to Emily's question, and that is, I forgot to mention, in Golden, Colorado, they also have a special magic, or they have like the equivalent of like a Disneyland, I guess you would call it, and it's called the Magic Mountain Theme Park.
Oh my God. Okay. There's a Magic Mountain theme park in Los Angeles as well, near where I grew up. So that's interesting that they have one there as well.
Yeah, and it's very focused to be a storybook Victorian theme shopping village. So it's all Victorian style buildings.
Interesting. Okay.
Very interesting. But I'll stop there. Oh, Emily.
Okay. Yes. So my question is just really quick. Both when I listen to your spiritual warfare video and when I'm listening to you talking, whenever I hear the term mummies on parade, I'm thinking like zombie apocalypse. And when you watch like any of the shows or movies that present this, you see zombies walking down the street all in a group, kind of like a parade moving through a city, right? And was whatever was going on last weekend, was that a celebration of the point in which enough people have been injected with the nonsense that we are now in the zombie apocalypse, right? And so that's just maybe my own thoroughly modern pop culture brainwashed perception of something that is a much more historical and alchemical thing. But for some reason, when you said the term mummies on parade, my head went zombies on apocalypse.
No, I more get the sense that it's like a marker. They're marking to the ones in the know that
Yes.
there's a certain point that's been reached now, and we've moved from, you know, stage 1 to stage 2, or we've moved from control level 1 to control level 2, or, you know, there's something that the ones who know what this specifically and been waiting for it, they know what the message is.
I wonder what percentage of the population had been inoculated by that parade time last weekend, right? To move from stage to stage kind of thing, right? Because you were talking also in that video about how we got the leper colony. I actually spoke about that, you know, in a video on kind of a completely different topic, but sort of connected, right? That we are now to this point where like there's no, like it's changing, there's no going back, there's no saving, there's nothing, right? And so like that marker you're speaking of, right? So that it was just kind of like my other or alternate or complementary perception of such marker point. So I think that was pretty much it for what I had. Anything else before we go on?
No, I think that's been good. I think I should stop talking and listen to you guys now.
We like hearing you talk. So, all right, here we go. So this is what I got. So what I did, I listened to your spiritual warfare video because you had mentioned it in your email to us. And then I looked at the articles, but I focused on one because mine was on the National Geographic one that was trying to make me sign up, and I don't sign up for anything. So I really just focused on one. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to go do a lot of other further research, but I got so many things just from that article because it was an unusual article. It was the one that was on the website is Global News, right?
Right.
And so like, I was first struck by like the lack of like any kind of real intellectual archaeological kind of language. It was all just like the article was written for like someone in kindergarten, right? And it started with they found a lost golden city, not they like unearthed or they dug up or after searching for, you know, blah, blah, blah. It was just like they found like, oh, look at that. I just found a quarter on the ground, right? Like it was a weird language to me. And they said they found it under the sand near Luxor, right? Which immediately brought up for me like the Luxor in Las Vegas here. What is, it's a topic I've covered many times in other programs. If you remember, it was the topic of Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series, did a large portion on the Luxor. And I have had some strange experiences both in that hotel and observing it from many hundreds of miles away. When the light shines up, you can actually see it from Tucson, Arizona. You can see the light when they have it on at its brightest. So I always understood that it was something more than just a hotel. And then, you know, so it brought up for me, what is Las Vegas, right? And, you know, that's a city where people go to claim their gold in terms of, you know, different perception of what gold is, but that's all about money and finding riches and wealth. And just to the note here for those playing the Glass Bead Game with Michael and I, the same day that you sent this, somebody submitted a logo for us of a version of the Glass Bead Game on the Las Vegas sign, right? Like it was literally like they made kind of the Glass Bead Game onto the you know, welcome to Las Vegas sign. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then it was like, okay, how do they know that this was for King Tut's grandfather? Right? Like what, like they would just said, like they already know it was for, that's what it was for. How do they know it? They don't explain anything to that. And this guy's name was Amenhotep, right? And just a few weeks ago, Michael did an interview with a gentleman named Hotep Jesus, right? And like, I've been following Hotep Jesus for a couple of years. I think he's an interesting cat. But if someone were to tell me that a friend of mine was going to interview Hotep Jesus, Michael Wan would be the last person I would think of, because they don't talk about anything even remotely correlated or connected. So Michael had been pulled on to this very unusual panel of guests on the Sam Tripoli show. It makes sense that it would include Chris Knowles, but it doesn't make sense that it would include Hotep Jesus. It almost feels like an insert or like something else, like almost like there was a precognitive understanding that we would have this conversation here, and that was almost being thrown out as an anchor or a connective point, right? Because when people pray, they say amen, they're praying to Jesus or God or whatever. So we have Amenhotep, and I don't know anything about religion or as much about Egypt as you, but I was like, that is pretty weird that like he has this very, like Hotep Jesus is not in his realm of stuff unless we take it into this paradigm, right? In any kind of way. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So that popped out at me right away, right? And then I was curious as to like what qualifies something as a golden city, because in there it literally says there's no gold here, right? And so it doesn't really necessarily have to do with that. It's a metaphysical thing? Is it because of some kind of lore? Like, how does one qualify what a golden city is? And then it goes on to that the name of this city or whatever is Aten, and it's on the bank of the Nile. Well, I know my question was in connection to Austin, because Michael correlates the Susquehanna to the Sequana. So can we correlate Austin to Aten and the Nile to the Colorado River? Because to me right now, what I'm seeing going on here is that a similar type of empire or whatever you call whatever went on there for a period of time in Egypt, right? Like something like that seems to be happening in a very different, modern, more technological, or at least maybe they were more advanced than us, but you know, a different version of the same kind of thing, right? So we had Aten and Austin. And then the next thing was, while searching for Tut's, I can't even read my own cemetery. Can't even read my own writing. Something at Aten. Okay. Oh, formations of bricks began to appear in all directions. Not we started to unearth these. They just appeared as if like, you know, magic, right? Like felt like so many of the way this article was written, it was really much more like magical thinking than archaeological dig. So this, these bricks began to appear, and the way they describe them is zigzag, and they show some of those pictures. Like you were right, they didn't show that many pictures, and there was just a few, but there was this whole little part where there was like the zigzag bricks and then these squares and whatnot. And if you look at some of that from above, right? And I've been talking about this in a couple of ways. Like some of these things we see both in ancient cities and in modern cities in different ways. It looks not too much different than if you look down at a QR code. Like right now we're using our phones to scan QR codes to get menus at restaurants. And they even talk about a bakery here. I did it at a bakery the other day. If you look at some of these mazed kinds of things from up above, it looks not too different than a QR code does when you look at it through your phone. So I was thinking about that when I was looking at this little maze of bricks and stuff that they have there. So it began to appear in all directions, like almost as if just magically. That was interesting to me. And then I thought the findings they chose to focus on were interesting. They're like, there was the symbol of Amenhotep, there was some scarab amulets, a bakery, some pottery, right? It was kind of interesting what they chose to focus on. And then the next thing I went to was that they were quoting a professor from Johns Hopkins, right? Who said it was the second most important find after Tut's tomb, right? And so I thought that was interesting, this idea, like, so a city to me indicates life and a tomb indicates death. So they're saying that death is more important than life. And then of course, it's that she's at Johns Hopkins, right? And everything in which we have been exposed to for the last year sort of refers back to for evidence and emerges from Johns Hopkins, right? So after watching your discussion of the mummy parade and what it was ushering in, I found it interesting that Johns Hopkins is implicated here. That's where Event 201 took place. That's where we're constantly being referred back to for information and evidence on what's going on currently. And that is the thing that brought us to this point where we're watching the mummy parade and you're perceiving it as a marker, right? So we have Johns Hopkins again. So why would there be a connection between the two things, the virus and the city find right? Why is Johns Hopkins like the main focus of both of these two kinds of things in some ways? So then it was that there was a glimpse of life at the height of ancient Egypt, and it shed light on the lives of King Tut's parents, who tried to shift Egypt from polytheism to worship of Aten, or the sun god, which the city is named after that, right? And what you said about Akhenaten looking like Barack Obama, right? It made me think back to that really excellent video that Freeman did on that, right? And just the other day, when I was recording a show with Danny, we showed a clip that got almost no notice that Tucker Carlson showed on his show of Barack Obama literally saying, like, it would be his preferred way of ruling to have somebody else as the front man who's wearing a wire who he feeds lines to from his basement while he's wearing his pajamas. And to me, that was basically the revelation of the method of what's sort of going on here, and that we are really in still in Barack Obama's rule, and he is some kind of Egyptian pharaoh or some kind of, you know, whatever. I don't know the proper lingo for all of that. So I went to the Akhenaten thing too. And what is Barack Obama? Who is Barack Obama? You know, that sort of thing. There was no, it did say in there that there were no mummies found, right? So this article came out at the same time as the mummy parade, and they made the point that there were no mummies found. The mummies were over, you know, on parade doing something else. They were busy, right? They were hired out to a different party. It said there was mention of unusual burials of cows or bulls. And we're hearing all of this propaganda also coming from someone related to Event 201 about how bad cows are, like how cows are the problem for all of our climate crisis and all that kind of stuff. So there was a reference to that. And then there were several tombs that they had found that had treasures in them, but they haven't unburied them yet. So they're sure that there are treasures. They have to work to get into them. How do they know there are treasures inside of them if they haven't unburied them yet? I thought that was interesting. And then they're talking about how this is a win in the war between like Egypt and the UK in terms of like, you know, like usually they take their stuff to a museum in the UK, but now they're going to, you know, have this museum that they're trying to do in Egypt, and they're going to keep this stuff there. So all this stuff seems to be implicated in the Battle of Empire kind of thing. Weird. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But what this takes me to, and Michael and I keep circling back to this, and that like a lot of the things that are happening right now feel like there's time anomalies associated with it, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Tenet that Christopher Nolan put out over the last summer when we were in the midst of both the rioting and the virus kind of stuff. But in it, basically, there are two realities where time runs in opposite direction. And sometimes you can have this like thing called the temporal pincer movement, where you can like create a certain block of time where you can kind of go in. It's like the meeting point between the two timelines, and you can make changes, right? And so this story is making me think that like we think of ancient Egypt, we think of Egypt as being from the past. In my own personal, like I have my own relationship with Egypt that's different than yours. It's largely like more of a psychic remote viewing kind of nature, but it was something that just started presenting itself to me without me going looking for it. And actually that half started when I first lived in Austin, right? I have always felt like we haven't gotten to ancient Egypt yet. Like that's something in the future that we are sort of, for some reason, there was like a beacon thrown down that we're seeing and we're working our way towards it, right? And so if we have two timelines where time is going in the opposite direction, and for some reason we're in this crossover period where we're able to see elements of both, like it's called the temporal pincer movement, right? Then like some of this and the way they're talking about things appearing, right? Like maybe Barack Obama is Akhenaten. Maybe that hasn't happened yet. It's about to happen. And we're in this weird place where we're seeing things omnidirectionally. In fact, they even said that these cities started to appear in all directions, like mud bricks and stuff like that was coming from all directions. So this weird time that we're in, where there's an indication being made that something is changing, I think we're in the temporal pincer movement. In the movie, it's 10 minutes. I don't know if we're experiencing it for 10 months, 10 years, or whatever it is, but everything is changeable because there are realities that are where time is flowing in different directions. So I think that's pretty much what I got there. Who would like to go first?
Michael, you want to start?
Certainly. So that was a lot, Emily. So I got to go and pull off all of these different sort of pieces. So how did you find like a defining or a singular type of takeaway from the entire story of what it may be alluding to, like particularly as it relates to the message? It was a public message given to all of mass, you know, people who see mass media. What do you think the general takeaway was? Like their message given to that,
to everyday people?
Yeah, what's the one thing? Like we saw you pulled apart like lots of good, like, there's this and there's this and this, but how can, like, what's the one
So
takeaway?
they want people focused on it. Like what Howdie said is everything he tried to do to get away from this. It was stalking him. I think that was his sort of language to us about it. They want people's attention focused on it so that people will start to wonder or imagine or make up stories about or believe certain things about it, because our attention creates reality. And if Egypt hasn't actually been built in the way we think it has yet, then the way people interact with these ideas will be part of the energy that goes into creating either the new Egypt or what we think of as the old Egypt, but I don't know what it is, right? Like I don't know how time works, but they want people's like focused on it, even if like they get a complete misperception of it, if they don't understand anything about it or whatever.
Right.
Drawn to it, just like the attention was drawn to the Mayflower. Why?
Right. And maybe kind of the way that the language was so soft, it was so like, it was written, for a third grader, so that it would be very easy to wrap one's imagination on these like general points to begin to create like an internal image of like, this is how you should see it. And it's a real easy kind of fun way.
There was not much actual evidence that any person who was deeply knowledgeable or interested in Egypt would find compelling. It was all just stuff that, like, when you are like told for 10 seconds in third grade that there's a country called Egypt, they show you the amulet that looks like the one they showed there. You hear about King Tut and then they move on. So it was really like, now you've all heard.
It was almost a non-story. It was like it's like that you just made up a story. Like there really wasn't there was an event, but like, okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
And this goes to what you and I were talking about yesterday, right? In terms of like, maybe the way conspiracies work is they just get the people to make up stories about stuff, and then that brings it into actuality and absolves them of having to orchestrate everything in this very precise way in which we've been led to believe that this stuff happens. They're literally able to use people's own like imaginations, whether they're good ones or stupid ones, to create like a game that they can work to their advantage.
Yeah, I would certainly notice the language. Of course, I know these stories very well, and there was no information of where it is. There was no information of what's actually there. There's no information of, and like you say, it's like, okay, show a couple of scarabs, show a couple of, show like a winged sun disk, but you're saying this is the greatest find since Tutankhamun,
right?
And like, so the greatest find since Tutankhamun, you've got to have either you've actually gone and excavated the whole city for a number of years, and you know exactly what's there, and you're making that comment knowingly but not showing anything. That's option A. Or option B, you're making it up, because there's otherwise you should start saying how. Like I look at a city like Tanis, which is in the north of Egypt. That was discovered. I don't remember exactly when that was discovered, but that city is massive. And like the temple there is as large as the temple at Karnak. And it's an unbelievable thing that almost no tourists go to. It's only been open for a few years. They've been working on it for like 20 years just to do the excavations and reveal all that's there. It's a weird city. It's all burnt up. It's been, the granite's been melted. It's bizarre. They got stuff you can show there. Massive, giant statues of Ramesses II. You've got tons of, and the greatest discovery since Tutankhamun, and all you've got is a Ushabti figure. So, right away, it was like, so this is wrong.
So two things, like when we just go walking in the few miles around here, close to the river, we find these odd stone buildings that everything else has been gentrified and starting to build up. But there seems to be, like, even some people have left them in their front yard. Their house is built around them, right? Okay. So it's like these things can be found even like in downtown Austin. It doesn't look that different than some of what that looked like, right? But also the other explanation for this is if they're reporting from the other side of the timeline river, right? Like, let's just say that the temporal pincer movement is the river, and on one side time flows in one direction and on the other side flows the other, right? And the people on one side, some people know that this thing exists. They know that this concept exists of time flowing in two different directions. So the language indicates that they understand something is going to happen, but they don't know what yet, sort of, right? So it's almost as if the reporting is happening from one timeline where this unearthing is happening on another, right? And so the lack of detail is like almost trying to like get out ahead of it in a certain way, catch it, right? Like in all of Christopher Nolan's movies, there is this sort of time reversal, like catching the bullet, the inverted bullet kind of stuff, right? And to me, the lack of definition around things feels like we sense something is coming, but we don't know exactly what.
Yeah. Again, I don't know why I was pulled to draw this story up, but we're moving in interesting directions with it.
All right, cool.
All right.
Michael.
Is it my turn? Do I get the baton?
All right, the build up to this has been immense, Michael, because I had to hold you back from
Well, hopefully I'll live up to expectations. I'm just excited. I get excited. I like to be excited. All right. So generally speaking, like my overall take upon this after seeing this article is one, it's completely connected to the stuff we've worked at before. Like there's a continuity. It's not like that ended and then this began. This is a continuity. So that is part of the context. What I saw a lot of, or what I took away from in looking at this story, is a lot about false realities, creating false realities, just like what you're saying, Emily, like on the more basic level, like not getting into the timelines, but just like, I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff so you can see reality, so that this is your understanding of how reality works. But then this is also tied into something which is larger. From my understanding, without getting into the fact that all of the timelines, or at least our history, has been manipulated, I'm just going to start with the assumption, like, let's just take it at like history book level, like the last 400 years, and which is what the Mayflower kind of tied into, was this movement into where we are now, and we're moving more and more and more into what this next false reality is, but they want everyone tied into it. So I'm looking at this from a whole bunch of different lenses, but it's ultimately grounded in that, is this understanding of like the magic of the false reality for the masses, the occultic ritual, just like what Howdie was saying, like, you know, the moving of the 22 pharaohs, like that is, or mummies, that is a marker. That's a marker for those with eyes to see, but it's also like but it still is, it's a symbol to the sleeping mind, or the sleeping mass mind. So that said, I'm pulling up a whole bunch of different things, different bullet points. So that jumped out, and I'm going to go and pull up my screen. All right. So I'm going to begin right here. I think this was the same article.
Yep.
In which I got some cat doing a noise in the background. So what jumped out to me, same thing that jumped out to you guys, like gold was really, really important. That was being pointed out. The fact that this was in context to context to King Tut, and it being the second most significant discovery, like, you know, and to your point, Howie, when you were like, well, maybe they're making up the whole thing, like, or maybe like that was so insignificant, or the King Tut thing was made up as well, like, you know, who knows, like everything we're fed are these stories, but nonetheless, these are the bullet points. Also very important was Luxor, and I'm going to go down Las Vegas as well, because I don't think there is a better symbol in modern world of a false reality than the city of Las Vegas. Like everything from the architecture, it's all made up of like a copy of something else. It's like not real economies. Nothing is being built. There's nothing real about it yet, you know, it exists. So this was just something which kind of jumped out. We're going to get into Zahi. How do I pronounce his name?
Hawass.
Hawass. So just pointing out the obvious, like, you know, the name has a resonance with the whole Aleister Crowley, the guy who his holy guardian angel, who he got all of his information from, this Aiwass and Haiwass. Supposedly Crowley first had contact with Aiwass on April 9th. You know, that's when this happened. And when Crowley did that, he did it through his wife, Rose, while they were in Cairo. So, you know, we're just going to put that in the background. And you go and look at supposedly what Crowley's all about. He's ushering in the age of Horus, right? You know, the new age and what it's going to be. So let's Let's now switch into Luxor. So Luxor is really, really big in the collective sleeping mind. And the reason why I say that is, one, is it's so obvious. Like when you see it, like, you know, more than any of the other like grand hotels within Las Vegas, like, you know what this is. You got to know a thing or two maybe about like France or Italy to understand the subtleties of the Venetian, but everyone knows what the Luxor is. And a ton of Hollywood movies have been tied to the Luxor. So I start looking at the Luxor, and I'm like looking for something interesting. And the thing which jumped out at me was like this from the Wikipedia is, on May 7th, 2007, a vehicle exploded in the Luxor parking garage due to a homemade pipe bomb, and it left one dead. Local authorities believe the victim, who worked at Nathan's Famous Hot Dog, was the intended target. The hotel was not evacuated. So the things which are interesting is this, like, so assuming this is true, that they went and it was like a hit on a Nathan's hot dog employee. Like, in building a pipe bomb seems to be rather a rather significant, or rather like you're really going out of your way. Like, there are a lot of things that go wrong with a pipe bomb. Like, that doesn't sound like, if you just want to take someone out, you're going to do a pipe bomb. I did not include it here, but one of the things I read about this pipe bomb was that it was devised to kill one person. I'm like, how the hell do you build a pipe, like a pipe bomb to begin with, but a one-person pipe bomb? Like, that's like really sophisticated pipe bomb stuff. But what's even more interesting is the fact of when did it happen? May 7th, 2007. And so May 1000, 2007 puts us right in the middle of the whole anniversary weekend of the 400th anniversary of the establishment of Jamestown. This is where it all began. This is in that week. The entire year, if you look at the calendar, was a build up to this 400th anniversary. And so included, and that happened on May 12th. May 12th was when the actual, like when Queen Elizabeth II was there, George Bush was there, Sandra O'Connor. Remember, this began with Queen Elizabeth I. That was when the British Empire was first an idea, when it was one of those hidden forces which Howdie was referring to. This is the Bookstone celebration. And we see like this Luxor, like strange ritual such type of killing. But that's not the only one, because 4 days before that was when we have the Virginia Tech shooting. Actually, no, I'm going to take that back. The Virginia Tech shooting was on the 16th, right around on like the fire day. This was in Blacksburg, Virginia. 33 people were killed, all of that sort of stuff. But on 4 days before this thing that happened at the Luxor, and a week before the 400th anniversary celebration, which Queen Elizabeth went to in Jamestown, she went to the General Assembly in Richmond, Virginia, of Virginia. Virginia is named for the Virgin Queen, Queen Elizabeth I. She's stepping into the land of her namesake. She's Queen Elizabeth II. So she's there, you know, they do this big sort of like human sacrifice on the fire ritual of, you know, in April. And then what happens? What do? The Queen, one of the survivors of the shooting, Caitlin Carney, who was shot in the hand, presented the Queen with a bracelet of 32 jewels in Virginia Tech colors. Who do you think that ritual was for? I mean, in the real world, if there was a tragedy, the Queen's given the flowers, the Queen is given the jewels. No, this is very clear. This is who this is about. This is for you, Queenie. Here are your 22 jewels or your 32 jewels. And then after that, she goes to Jamestown. So let's go another slide deeper. So, all right, this is where the article was. So this was in the USA Today. A homemade bomb left on top of the car. The man killing tried to pick it up. The blast happened shortly after 4 a.m. Where is the quote where I wanted to say? The man had just finished his shift at the hot dog stand. He was a hot dog stand shift worker. That's who this guy was. Like, I'm not saying like there's a human value tied to the quality of work, but like this is like, put this all in context about like the uniqueness and the unusualness of this. This appears to have been a small device that was constructed in such a way to target a single individual victim. What the hell does that mean? So, okay, so we read through this whole thing and we're like, Nathan's famous. Like, it was a big deal. Like, this is Nathan's famous hot dog. And so in this USA Today article, they say workers at Nathan's would not comment. We left messages at the corporate offices at Westbury, New York. So now we got a pin in the ground. Okay, let's go look at Westbury, New York. Well, Westbury, New York has a very rich history. It's on Long Island, and it like ties back to the whole story which we are given about how the Manhattan was sold for like a bunch of beads and some wampum or something. But this goes back. Westbury is what is in that time frame. And Westbury, so the village of Westbury was founded in 1607 by Henry Willis, and it was named after his hometown, which is Westbury in England. And so you go and you look at Westbury in England, and Westbury in England is best known for this. You know, you've got all of these horse carvings on the hillside of England. So this is the white horse. And so you mentioned, Emily, you mentioned, what's his name? Bill Cooper,
Behold the pair horse.
About the white horse. And the white horse talks about the apocalypse, and the apocalypse is always the end of an age and the birth of the new one. That's why I was asking the question, like, what is this Egyptian guy a symbol of? Because you described to me, from the language I look at it from, is like the end of an age to another. These people who are like, responsible for the symbolic and literal destruction of one way the false reality is created to create a new one. It's all a bunch of false realities, but that's what, to my understanding, what this is all the ritualistic telling of that story. I also agree with you completely, Howie, that inside the false reality is always truth. And the alchemical story of discovering the gold is deeply embedded on that. They want us to focus on the false reality story. But the truth of the matter is, when you go through changes like this, the only thing you can work on and control of is your own inner world. And that is the beauty of being alive in this time. But back to this. If you go and you look at this white horse, what you're going to go and find is like this white horse is a bunch of bullshit. Like this white horse, like it wasn't around prior to like the mid 1800s. There's no sort of there's like some history around it, but there's no proof to it. There are other horses in the area which seem to have like archaeological evidence pointing to a Bronze Age existence, but this one ain't one of them. This is all a bunch of bullshit to look at a false reality, which is a copy of another one. And I also want to point this out too, where Queen Elizabeth, where did she go right before she was at presented the 33 stones of the sacrifice victim? She was at the Kentucky Derby. So horse racing, a thoroughbred is a British aristocracy creation. The thoroughbred horse was created in Britain by the horse racing aristocracy. They created a new type of horse. So like it's all connected. It's the 133rd winner, all this sort of stuff. So now let's go down one more. So now let's go look at Zahi. If you know this guy, like he's very controversial. He's always arguing with like Graham Hancock. Think whatever you want of that. I think that's just like dog and pony shows, but who knows? That's
confirmation. Dog and pony show.
Yeah. One of the things which is always talked about him is his correlation with Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, and all of his Egyptian visions, if you will. And so the story basically is that Aiwass is he was funded by the Edgar Cayce Association, the Association of Research and Enlightenment. They paid for his way through school, and he's always had kind of a debt to them and like all that they represent. And, he's denied that. He says there's no sort of correlation. That's like grossly misunderstood. I want to point this out. This is Jamestown. This is where ARE is located. They're about 10 miles apart. So let's put that in consideration. So now we go, and so Zahi says, like, no, I ain't got no connection with no Edgar Cayce. That's all a bunch of bullshit. But here's a book which he wrote with this Mark Ledner guy. And so this was published by University of Chicago Press. University of Chicago Press is top line. Like, it's not like, I'm not saying anything bad about like, Intervisions or Llewellyn, but if you are in mainstream Matrix world, you do not have more academic, a more academically respected press than University of Chicago, maybe like Harvard or something, their press. But anyway, so Zahi writes this book with Leonard. And this guy, he's got absolutely no problem going on record saying like all of his connection to Egyptology comes from the Edgar Cayce Foundation and the ARE. He makes no bones about it. So like, I find it, I'm just bringing that out. So like, yeah, there's definitely a correlation between that spokesman and Edgar Cayce. Whatever or whomever Edgar Cayce is, I don't know. But what I am saying is there's a correlation. This is the bankroll of that. So let's go a little bit deeper on this. So this is an article on this guy, Mark Lehner, and he's talking all about archaeology and American interest in Egypt, archaeology, and all of this stuff. They're layer after layer after layer of these organizations that fund things. And we can trace all of it back to this organization called the American Research Center in Egypt. So let's go look a little bit at them. Where do I find that? So if you go look at ARC, it was founded in 1948 by Edward Forbes. Edward Forbes is like an insider's insider. His father was the co-founder of Bell Telephone Company with Alexander Graham Bell. His brother was the ambassador to Japan in the years leading up to World War II. Like, this guy's an insider. We see that he did stuff with Paul Sachs, as in Goldman Sachs. It's the same Sachs guy. We also see this guy promoted a lot of like X-ray study of the paintings in the museum's collection. Like, he knows he's looking for something. And we see he was the president and the founder of this American Research Center. So let's go down one more. If we go and we look at this ARC, the same thing, founded by Forbes. Throughout its early years, the center received substantial funding from the United States Department of State. Why the hell is the Department of State funding this Egyptian archaeological research, unless you know that these are the people who are involved with it? We also know the guy's brother was a diplomat. So we're beginning to go back into espionage and all of those worlds. We see this right here. The staff of ARC were evacuated from Egypt during the 6-Day War, but returned after the cessation of hostilities, even though the United States and Egypt would not resume normal diplomatic relations until 1974. So the governments of Egypt and the United States, they are not talking, they're in boycott, all this sort of stuff. But you know what? We're going to let the State Department funded ARC, they're still going back and forth. Whatever they're doing, like, there are clear channels of communication between this organization, these organizations of American Egypt research and the Egyptian government. Regardless of what's happening on the outer surface, they're always connected. In the aftermath of the devastating earthquake of 92, I wonder what caused the earthquake, who knows? ARC was chosen by U.S. aid to administer the American funding initiative to restore the damage. So after this earthquake, ARC gets to go in and they get to look at everything. U.S. aid is the one who says they get to do that. So a quick search, U.S. aid, CIA front, you get your 600,000 hits, and you see all of these articles, how CIA and U.S. aid are a well-known connected organization. You just scratch the surface. This is all false reality. We can see the infrastructure of the organizations which are connected to all of this. So we got that. Oh, and let's go look at this also. So we looked at the connection. They keep on saying this goes back to King Tut's tomb revelation. You know, where does that come from? So all of that is Howdie pointed out. You know, we connect this to this guy right here. How do I pronounce his name? Herbert. He
Just
was
call him Lord Carnarvon is the easiest.
There we go. Lord Carnarvon. He's the financial backer for the excavation. Who is this guy? This guy is Rothschild. He's married into the Rothschild family. This is all Rothschild money. So I also want to throw this out also. If you're familiar with anything with the CIA headquarters, they have this sculpture, which is all about a crypt with hidden code right in the front of Langley. It's called Cryptos. And there are a couple things that have been decoded. And one of the parts that have been decoded is a quote from Howard Carter as he's talking of what he said when he discovered the tomb of King Tut. Again, CIA, King Tut, in your face. This is what all of this is connected to. There's false realities. There's so many levels of this reality which is going on of this storyline. So then I'm going to go, I'm wrapping up right now. So you mentioned Freeman a little bit earlier. If you're familiar with the great Freeman Fly and a lot of his earlier research, he talked about this story a lot, like 10, 15 years ago, about the Egypt Air Flight 990 crash and how he has had how he screenshot or he kept like the newspaper that initially came out right afterwards. And then it was completely scrubbed from the internet and scrubbed from history. And supposedly what was happening on this flight, and this makes a little bit of reference, at least to Freeman. So I'm just going by Freeman's stuff, but you know, I'm going to throw it out there. Like Freeman does good work. It was that there were a bunch of diplomats who were on this flight from JFK in New York City to Egypt. And what they were going to do was on the night of where does it say? So they planned to cap the pyramid in gold the night of Y2K, but didn't after all. So apparently there was a bunch of people who were on that plane who were going to Giza. This happened on, as you could see, October 31st, 1999. And it was going to be another one of these golden rituals. And then that plane goes down. Where does the plane go down? It goes down 60 miles south of Nantucket. So where's Nantucket? Right here. This about 60 miles. There's Plymouth Rock. So we've got Plymouth Rock right here. We've got this going down right there. And, you know, we have this connection of ARE to Jamestown. We see there's always something right by all of their sites. So the last thing I want to say about this whole thing was from that article, which originally started it all. And the second half of the article became kind of like a social commentary article, how there was all of this pomp and circumstance regarding the parade of the mummies and how it was to show Egypt in this beautiful way, and they completely blocked out all of the parts of the Egyptian city. I'm not certain where it was going through that were, you know, they didn't want to show the kind of rundown spots. And so along the 5-mile path to the new museum lay stretches of working class neighborhoods that were deliberately hidden from view ahead of the parade. And here we see this again. And this comment here is in reference to the fact that they weren't trying to show, they were trying to hide something. There is a tendency to show a better picture instead of fixing the existing reality. The shadow language, the twilight language embedded in the story keeps going back, like this false reality. There's a false reality, the Las Vegas false reality, the White Horse false reality. All of this stuff, like, you know, keep your eyes fixated on this one false reality. We're really doing something. We're really doing a ritual. We're really bringing up we're trying to tap into an ancient energy or maybe an energy from a future which hasn't shown itself yet. And we want you to put your imagination to it, but you just aren't going to realize what you're putting your imagination to. So it is with that, I stopped my frantic speech to get it all in 20 minutes. And I opened the...
it was 23 minutes.
23 minutes. There we go. All right. Thank you for being an attentive audience.
And just, I'm going to allow Howdie to go first, but I think it's cute that you always say that mine is a lot. That was a lot. And I like a lot. That was a lot. Howdy, go ahead.
Okay. I guess first I would just make a couple of comments to add a little bit, because that was a lot of really interesting stuff that Michael just presented there. And a couple of things to let you know. First of all, the Carnarvon Howard Carter connection to the tomb, just so everybody knows how weird this story is. Supposedly a Ushabti figure, which is a figure that's placed in with mummies, was supposedly found with Tutankhamun's name on it around 1911, 1912, something like that. And Carter believed, or this is the story. This is the story now. Carter is said to believe he felt that the tomb of Tutankhamun must still exist, so he managed to get Carnarvon to start funding him a lot of money. Now, what Carter does at this point is the most brilliant scheme. First of all, he was the first one ever to put a grid over top of the Valley of the Kings. So he was going to grid the whole thing so that every inch and square of it could be marked and recorded. Now, okay, so he's got like 40 squares on the Valley of the Kings. In one of the squares is the figure where the Ushabti with the name of Tutankhamun is found. Where would you logically start looking in your first dig with the first amount of money that's coming in? Well, you would look in the square where you found. No, he starts in the farthest square, completely away from it. They dig through every other single square on the grid until supposedly just before 1922, when they're almost out of money and they've wasted time with the war, we'll get the last bit of money. We'll look at the last square on the grid, and hallelujah, we found it. That's the story.
And
so
didn't like some little kid like discover it or something? Like he like tripped over like a rock, and then from there, like, I mean, it was literally, I mean, I guess you could say it in hindsight, but it's like an Indiana Jones story. It's like part of like that mythos.
Right. So whatever happened, it's obvious they found some kind of tomb right away. And then this whole grid thing was like a giant thing to keep everybody focused somewhere else, where they were doing whatever they were doing for 10 years, stealing probably a lot of stuff and getting it out of there, performing various rituals that needed to be performed and whatnot. So that's the first one. That once you know about the grid story, you know right away everything in the story is a lie. The second one is, the connection you had with Edgar Casey that they try to really tone down. I mean, for a long time, the ones who had controlled the Giza Plateau almost totally were Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner. And Lehner, had gone there, paid for by the Edgar Casey Foundation, and was actually writing a book did write a book for them, searching for the Hall of Records, and then somehow magically in the late 70s decides, I think all this Edgar Casey stuff is wrong, went back, fixed up his degree, and became a standard archaeologist, and of course now becomes the archaeologist, the one when National Geographic would go on to do a program. It's always Mark Lehner presenting from Giza with Zahi Hawass, who, whether he wants to say it or not, they paid for his master's degree in the US, or his doctor's degree, whatever it was. So again, what does the Edgar Casey Foundation have as such important need to have the two people in charge of that site, in a sense, in their group? So that was two. The last thing, just to get a question now for Michael, and that's concerning the American Research Center in Cairo, which I've been to, of course. ARCA. If you look at the word again, it's ARCE. So the word arc is right in it.
Mm-hmm.
So Arcadia, Archon, everything is all right in the symbolism of that entire place. And if you wonder where it is, it's in Garden City.
Very interesting. My mom used to work for Arco, and there is connections between some of that and some of this underground stuff and ancient technology and future technology and stuff like that. All right, that was fascinating. I have a couple. I think I'm going to try and do this so that I'm going to work my way backwards and try and end with the most entertaining part. All right, I'm going to see if I can thread this needle, but this is a lot of random stuff to thread. All right, so first of all, when you were talking about like put the cap on the golden pyramid, Y2K, but they didn't kind of thing. Interestingly, I moved here right before Y2K, and just a few months ago, so Y2K was this, event with the internet that they thought was going to happen and whatever. Well, just a few months back here, there was an event with the internet with the solar winds hack, right? And there's a bunch of pyramid construction going on right downtown where that solar winds hack and building was, right? So we have something kind of parallel going on here. You were talking about this statue of Kryptos in relation to this. Well, during this past week, where this attention has been paid to this article, Kryptos have soared to all-time highs, right? And we have this new thing people are doing with cryptos called NFTs that are like the modern version of some of these old kinds of sculptures that have embedded and hidden codes in it and stuff like that. So if you're familiar with NFTs, it's a non-fungible token that is like people create this. I mean, I don't fully understand it because I don't know that it's possible to fully understand this. I think that's part of the point of it, but it's basically works of art that have all of these sort of crypto hashes embedded in them, right? So there's that. And then I did notice also in one of your little clips, Michael, there was talk of an earthquake, right? And Howdie had something about the Earthquake Institute in Golden City. So we have this earthquake mentioned in the Egyptian thing, right? Where then all this stuff started to be revealed. And there's the Earthquake Studying Institute in Golden that popped out at me. Mm-hmm. The thing about Barack Obama, right? Sorry, the thing about, we were talking about this situation being one time we went from one way to another. And one of the things that happened during the time of Barack Obama was that we went from during George Bush, we were doing the old school warfare, Middle Eastern terrorists, 9/11 and blah, blah, blah. Barack Obama ushered in basically the street warfare in the streets here based on racial stuff and social justice, almost like American versions of the Arab Spring. Right. So like he's bringing that sort of, remember part of the Arab Spring was what happened in Tahrir Square. I think you mentioned Tahrir Square in your video about spiritual warfare, Howdie and whatnot. So there was that kind of thing there in what you talked about. And then we have this, you were talking about New York, both in your White Horse kind of thing, but also Nathan's Hot Dogs is from New York. So this is where I'm going to kind of get into, hopefully, there's a couple of things that are uniquely American activities, right? One of them would be that have been exported all over the world, hot dog eating contests, right? And they use Nathan's hot dogs for hot dogs eating contests, right? And so we like that's one of the things that everyone around the world knows that because they have those hot dog eating contests and the Japanese guys are really good at them. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the documentaries on this, but it's kind of fascinating. That's a uniquely American pastime. Another uniquely American pastime is breakdancing and like dancing circles and hip hop stuff that have been exported all around the world that the Asians are also particularly good at. But okay, so there's a style of dancing that is my favorite style of dancing and that I actually started doing when I first moved to Austin. And I don't know sort of where it kind of came into my thing, but it's actually called King Tut. And it's a style of popping that is like geometric arm movements and stuff like, right? Like that is all around the head and stuff like this. And the gentleman who is famous, right? It is a lot of this kind of stuff, right? It's like creating like boxes around yourself. The gentleman who is famous for creating this style of dancing, or the most well-known person who did it, his name is Mr. Wiggles. And he was part of the original Rocksteady crew in New York that started all the street break dancing, right? And you can go and you can find videos of him like in the 80s doing this tutting to like that song that was like Egypt, Egypt or whatever, right? And it's a very
Steve Martin,
cult style of dancing that has also launched other styles off of it. Styles known as turfing, styles known as bone breaking, right? Which when you think of things with like mummification and things people used to do to alter their bodies. And then turfing is all about like, this is my turf, this is my location, this is how we do it here and whatnot. So Mr. Wiggles is famous for this King Tut stuff, right? And this style of dancing is very like, it's like sigil magic, right? It's like almost like creating sort of crop circles or geometric forms with your body that open portals and whatnot. And sometimes when you're watching some of these young kids, especially the ones who are famous for doing finger tuts, you're like, whoa, what is going on here? Like you can literally see almost like energetic shifts that are unusual. But Mr. Wiggles is from New York, right? Do you know where he lives now?
Austin?
No. Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. And you can literally find videos of him performing in the street in front of Luxor. In fact, there's a gentleman who like is one of the best like he does this bone breaking and turfing and tutting. His name is Schizo, right? That's his dancing name. And he was in the Cirque du Soleil, that was the Michael Jackson one. He's from Los Angeles, but he also moved to Las Vegas. And I think you can go back in either one of my old shows or one of the conspiracy cocktails, you will see, I'm showing a video of him doing this stuff in front of the Luxor and Mandalay Bay. He pulls up in his car, gets out in front of them and does this whole like tutting thing. But what he does is he's really flexible. He like is double jointed. So he doesn't just do it on top and in front. He literally does it behind his back. And it's almost like, you know, otherworldly, extra dimensional, right? So there's this style of dancing, and it would be fabulous to know that there wasn't such a person as King Tut, right? If that was totally made up, Howdy, and if by doing these dances, they're literally conjuring this person into existence that was not real in the first place. And that we're about to witness the return of something like that, right? Like this made up God, that, you know, like we think of it as something from the past, but maybe it hasn't actually happened yet. Yeah. And we're conjuring.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll leave you. I wasn't going to say this in the video, but okay, I'll say it now because it's in my books anyway. So my old Egypt book, but to me, my feeling is what that tomb really was is because most of the stuff that's in King Tut's tomb, because King Tut is supposed to be the pharaoh, even though he's a boy, who re-put in the new order, we might say. He got rid of Akhenaten and brought in the new order, but most of the objects in his tomb are all Akhenaten era objects. So my feeling was right away, if anything, it's Akhenaten's tomb, or it's the stuff from Akhenaten's tomb that they put in there, and if it's a real tomb, if Howard Carter didn't stuff it himself, let's pretend that the stuff is actually true. There's a reason then that maybe it was the one tomb not broken into and stolen on the whole of the Valley of the Kings, because even the Egyptians knew the bad magic that was locked into there. We don't want to let that out. So no matter how much gold or whatever else is in there, we're happy with it in there. And if you think, when did Carnarvon and Carter start this journey? 1914, right at the time that World War I starts. When does the announcement of King Tut's tomb happen? 1922, early 1922, just as the beginning of Hitler takes over the German Workers' Party. So, yeah.
And just to point out, the other part that was interesting about the connect, I wanted to tie this loop as well. The connection between breakdancing and Nathan's Hot Dogs, right? So the Nathan's Hot Dogs is from New York, but was in the Luxor, right? And the breakdancing, the Mr. Wiggles is from New York, but ends up in Las Vegas dancing in front of the Luxor, right? And so it's kind of interesting, these uniquely American things, New York, Las Vegas. But what you're saying, Howdy, is really interesting. And I think we even talked about that like, how do they know this belongs to King Tut? Right? I think that was brought up in the thing. Like they just like say that it does, but don't provide any evidence, and that this city was for Amenhotep or whatever, right? Like they don't say how they know that. They just expect us to believe that. But that allows for all of this stuff which you are speaking of. Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Michael, you have a last word on all that?
I think this was a very fun conversation. I like seeing this from a lot of different perspectives, and I'm also very interested now to see, like, to me there was a direct parallel between that Mayflower experience and what these 22 mummies. So the next one, which we do next month, I'm curious. I'm excitedly anticipating what that topic will be. Those are my final words.
Real quick, I have something that might connect that here. So in one of your little clips that you brought up a dizzying amount of them, Michael, but there was something, you didn't get to this part where they were talking, it was in the Freeman thing about the sea people, right? Like the little clip that you had up there, right? And so when we were talking in the last one about this stone in the creek in Round Rock, where this company was that made this Mayflower ship, right? And so we think the Mayflower is on the ship. That's the ocean. This Austin, Colorado River, we're in central Texas, this creek, this is rivers. Like these sea people, I think are under the land as well, right? They're in the rivers, right? Why are they making the thing for the ocean travel here they were even talking about the underground waterways here in Austin. In that article about that place the ship was. And there was a reference to the sea people, and that brings us to the Phoenicians and that connection to all of this ancient buildings that don't make sense and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I think that, now I'm going to have to, I have a lot of pressure on me to pick a good topic for the next one, but
it'll call you. It'll be so obvious that you don't, that it's no pressure.
All right, guys, this was absolutely a pleasure again. And before we go, Howdie, just remind people where they can find your work.
Oh, we can go over to, I guess, easiest place to start, Howdie McCoskey Talks, which is still amazingly on YouTube to this point. And there's some interesting stuff there. And then you can track websites and books from there if you want.
Awesome. Michael?
SusquehannaAlchemy.com is the best place to go.
Awesome. You guys can find me here at Emily Moyer on YouTube, and we will see you guys in a few weeks with round 3. Looking forward to it. Have a good one, guys.
See ya.